This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Agun Erev Shabbos Rabbi Sai. Wonderful to see everyone. Parshas Behaaloscha. Parshas Behaaloscha is a beautiful parsha, 136 psukim. I would like to share with you some original ideas on the parsha. By the way, I'm going to put up the Marmakomis on the screen, but if anybody wants to see the sources themselves, or the source sheets, so then you could subscribe and get it to your inbox every Erev Shabbos, as well as the Wednesday night Shiur will be sent to you on Wednesday, and the Marmakomis from Monday will be sent as well. You go to office at, you could send us a note to office@rabbidg.com. Also, they're posted at on our site, rabbidg.com. Okay, here's the first offering for today. Let me just post it here. Here we go. We know that on Rosh Hashanah we say 10 psukim of Malchios, 10 of Zechroinos, and 10 of Shofaros. You know, it's quite interesting. The psukim of Zechroinos, every single pasuk has the mention of the word Zikaron in it, or Zechar, because they're psukim of Zechroinos. Likewise, the psukim of Shofaros all talk about the shofar, or the tekiah, or the trua. But the psukim of Malchios, while the first 9 psukim have the word melech in it, the final pasuk, Shema, does not have the word melech. And it's somewhat surprising, because the theme is supposed to be Malchios. All the other psukim have the word melech, but the final pasuk does not have the word melech. Now obviously when you say Shema, you're makabel, the oil Malchus Shamayim. But I think we could explain even in a more compelling way. And what is the source for the psukim of Malchios, Zechronos, and Shofaros? It's a pasuk in this week's Parsha. Perek Yud, pasuk Yud, where the pasuk says, Uv'yom simchaschem, uv'mayadechem, uv'rashei chodshechem, uskatem achatzoitzrois, aloi loisechem, v'yal zivchei shalmechem, v'hayu lachem lezikaroin, lefnei eloikechem, ani Hashem eloikechem. Rashi brings from here, we learn out Malchios, Zechronos, v'Shofaros. Usikatem, Shofaros. Lezikaroin, Zechronos. Ani Hashem eloikechem is Malchios. The source of Malchios is not the word Melech, is Ani Hashem Elokeichem. And therefore Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad perfectly fulfills that which we learn out from the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem, because the Torah, the source itself doesn't say Melech, but rather the source itself says Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Then another Rashi struck me. Rashi in Perek Yud, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Rashi says, well, that's interesting. They encamped on the 20th day of Iyar. They left on the 20th day of Iyar. But wait a second. Says Rashi, we know they came to Sinai, B'chodesh hashlishi, let's say Bnei Yisrael, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, B'yom hazeh, bo'u midbar Sinai. They came to Har Sinai, Rosh Chodesh Sivan. They left almost a year later, the 20th day of Iyar. Says Rashi, that means they spent at Har Sinai a year minus 10 days. Now, how many days are in a lunar year? Could somebody tell me? One of the tzaddikim, chachamim on the shir. How many, who knows, how many days in a lunar year? That's right, 354. But they spent 10 days less than a lunar year. That means they spent 344 days at Sinai. Interesting. The number 344 is very significant. We were supposed to be in Egypt 430 years. The intense labor that we did in Egypt was only 86 years. That means we left 344 years early. Shemad, the Torah's Chaim brings that whenever there are decrees by the government of persecution, it's called Shemad, Shin Mem Dalet, to make up for the 344 years that we left Egypt early. a way that we protect ourselves from those 344 years is by learning Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. The gematria of Pardes, Pei is 80, Reish is 200, 280. Samach is 60, 340. Dalet is 4, 344. By learning Pardes, that helps extricate us from the 344 years we were supposed to be in Egypt. Perhaps the reason why we spent 344 days at Sinai is to somehow protect us from the 344 years that we left Mitzrayim early. Not bad, okay. Here's another thought. The episode of Kivrois HaTa'ava, where they had lust, they had desire. There's an idea that the activities and the actions of a nation in a certain location has influenced whatever takes place there. The episode of Kivrois HaTa'ava took place, Rashi says, in Midbar Paran. Now, what is Midbar Paran? Who's always in Midbar Paran? Whose land is the desert of Paran? Midbar Paran is the land of Yishmael. We know that Yishmael's midah is the midah of taiva, desire. Like Chazal tell us that out of 10 measures of erva, of promiscuity, came down to the world, and the Arabs took 9 of them. We know Yishmael is always associated with Mayim in the Chumash. He's always by the Mayim, because Mayim represents Taiva. So we could say that the episode of Kivrois HaTa'ava took place in Midbar Paran because the Klal Yisrael were influenced by being in the sphere of Yishmael. Okay. Perek Yud, Pasuk Lamed. Vayomer Elav, Yisro said, Lo yelech, I'm not going to go, Kiyam el Artzi. I'm going to go back to my land, Ve'el Mailadati. I'm not going with you. I'm not going with you. So Moshe says, Vayomer al na ta'azoi voisanu. Please don't leave us. Ki al ken yadata chanoiseinu ba'midbar. You know our encampment in the midbar. V'hayisa lanu le'einayim. You could be like eyes for us. So I have the following question. I wasn't sure whether to put this in the imponderables or in the insights. I think it's a compelling insight. Rashi says that when Moshe asks Yisro, don't leave us, Rashi says, Na is a lashon of bakasha. Please, Moshe says, I don't want anyone to say that you did not convert out of love. Because if people are going to see you go back, you know what they're going to say about you? They're going to say, you were not interested in Judaism for the right reasons. You just wanted to join them to inherit land in the land of Israel. And then when they told you weren't going to get land in Israel because you're a convert, you left them. So therefore, please do not leave us. But here's my question. Why is Rashi saying that's the motivation of why Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Yisro not to leave us? Because I don't want anyone to accuse you of having ulterior motives. But the Pasuk goes on to explain that Moshe gave a different reason. Rashi says, Ki al ken yadata chanusin ba'midbar, ki noya lecha la'asois. It is pleasant for you to do this. Al asher yadata chanusin ba'midbar. Because you know our encampment in the midbar. V'ra'isa nisim. And you saw the miracles. Egvura shenasa lanu. This is a different reason. Here Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Yisro, you should come with us because you're familiar with our ways, and you could be an einayim, you could be our watch out, you could be an objective opinion. So maybe that's the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu begged Yisro not to leave them. How does Rashi know that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu begged Yisro not to leave is because he was afraid that people would accuse Yisro of having ulterior motives? Maybe the reason Moshe Rabbeinu begged Yisro not to leave is for the very reason that Rashi goes on to say that you're familiar with our ways and you could be an objective opinion to us. And I would say very simply, because if na is a lashon of bakasha, he's begging, the reason provided later in the pasuk, Rashi says, Ki noya lecha la'asosais. It is pleasant for you to do this, namely to go with us and be an objective opinion, Rashi is saying this second reason is not critical. It's just a pleasantry. It's a reason why it would be nice for you to come with us. But that would not supply enough of a rationale why Moshe Rabbeinu begged Yisrael. Meaning the reason mentioned in the pasuk of Ki al ken yadata chanusin b'midbar, Rashi interprets this as Ki no'elecha. That's pleasant. But there must be a more compelling reason, and that's why Moshe begged. And that compelling reason is Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want Yisrael to be accused of converting for ulterior motives. Okay. You ready, everybody? Everyone fasten your seatbelt. This is the chiddush of the week. Everyone excited? Okay. You know, we're gonna pull everybody out of their screen. We're gonna make everybody make an appearance here. Okay, you ready for this? This is the chiddush of the week. Rash on the pasuk that the slav was going to come down. Okay, okay. Before we get there, Parak Yud Aleph pasuk Aleph. Vayihi ha'am k'mesainanim. Rashi says a very important rule that when it says ha'am, the nation, that refers to the wicked. Like the pasuk says, Ma'aseh la'am hazeh. But when Klal Yisrael are kisherim, we're called Ami, like it says Shalach Ami me'asisi lecha. Accordingly, we could explain a very difficult pasuk in the Nevi'im. The pasuk says, Nachamu nachamu Ami yoimar Elokeichem. And many Mefarshim, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz is troubled. God says, console, console, but what's the consolation? No consolation is offered. What is the consolation? But according to Rashi, we could say the consolation is the one word, Ami. Rashi says Ami means we are Kesherim. The fact that even though Hashem destroyed the temple and He chased us out of Eretz Yisrael, but He still refers to us not as Ha'am, but Ami, that itself is a form of consolation. Okay, next. Yud Aleph Tezvav. Moshe Rabbeinu was asked to gather the Zakenim. Rashi's bothered, what do you mean the Zakenim? What happened to the Zakenim who were in Mitzrayim? Says Rashi, a Chiddush, they died b'Tavera. They died, Vayhi ha'am k'mesainanim. They died in Kibros HaTava. Says Rashi, really they should have been killed at Sinai. However, Hashem didn't want to spoil Matan Torah with Avelos, so Hashem paid them back now. So the question is, why did Hashem pay them back now? Why didn't Hashem pay them back, I don't know, by the Chet HaEgel? Why didn't Hashem pay them back a different time? What would the connection be between the sin that they gazed at God at Sinai and the sin of Vayhi ha'am k'mesainanim by Kibros HaTa'ava? I would venture to say that the reason why Hashem paid them back now is because the sin of Kibros HaTa'ava was a very similar sin to what the Zakenim did at Sinai. Rashi says, what did the Zakenim do at Har Sinai? Shenoagu kalos roish, kinoi sheikh pitai, umedaber b'fnei hamelech, like biting their bread and speaking before the king. V'zehu vayoichlu vayishtu. At Har Sinai it says they ate and they drank. They didn't actually eat and they didn't actually drink, but they were noye kalos roish. They acted lightheaded. So it was like they ate and drank. So since their sin was analogous to eating and drinking, therefore they were paid back dafka now, not by the Meraglim, not by other sins, not by the rock, but by a similar sin. The similar sin was, they were vayoichlu vayishtu. Again, that's not literal, but it's viewed as eating and drinking, so they were dafka paid back by the sin of the achila by Kibros HaTa'ava. Okay. This is a chidush I did not see anywhere. And I think it's very interesting. Parak Yud Aleph Pasuk Yud Tes. The pasuk says, you know how long you're going to have this love for? Not 1 day, not 2 days, not 5 days, not 10 days, not 20 days, a month. I thought there were no extra words in the Torah. What is this whole lengthy, not 1, not 2, not 5, not 10, not 20. I mean, every speaker knows sometimes they have to be dramatic, but this is a little bit overkill. Not 1, not 2, not 5, not 10, why didn't it say not 17 and a half also? It should say not 1 day, 30 days. What are we adding by 5, 10, 20? What is that? Rashi says something interesting. Rashi says, the Shiurim died after 30 days. The Risham died immediately. Basar oidenu bein shinehem. So it comes out that the tzaddikim died after 30 days. The Risham died immediately. I would venture to say, and what about a Beinani? And what about an in-between guy? And what about a guy who was, mostly bad? What about a guy who was mostly good? So I would venture to say these different times, not 1, not 5, not 10, were different levels of punishment depending on what level you were on. This is not just a figure of speech. The Torah is not writing details for drama. Each number had a significance in terms of their punishment. Then we see a very interesting yesod, and that is doing mitzvahs could be very dangerous. What? How could doing mitzvahs be dangerous? Yeah, learning Torah could be very dangerous. How could that be? And it could even be more dangerous? Chumrais. Chumrais could be the most dangerous practice that a Jew could engage in. What? What kind of idea is that? Yeah, let me explain. Parak Yud Aleph Pasuk Chaf. You know why I'm killing you? I'm killing you because you despise God who is with you. Says Rashi, Es Asher B'Kerchem, Im Loi Shenatati Shchinasi Beinechem. Had I not planted my Shechina among you, Loi Gava Levavchem, you never would have been arrogant. Li Kanes L'cha Advarim Halalu, to want all these things, to want the meat. You know why you wanted meat? Because you were on too high of a madrega. What? Yeah. Hashem says, you know why you had such a big taiva? Because you had so much ruchnias. You had so much ruchnias. Therefore, you were so arrogant. And you had so much taiva. We see a very big yesod over here. We see that sometimes ruchnias could produce arrogance. And a person, as they climb in ruchnias, always has to be on guard that their spiritual achievements is not making them arrogant. See, the thing is that when a person learns, they have expansiveness of heart. And then instead of... Yeah, that's right, learn to with a cell phone on. Very dangerous. Yep, I agree. But sometimes spiritual achievements inflate the heart, and then instead of wanting more ruchnias, you channel that for taiva, for olam hazeh. This is a very common phenomenon, and a person always has to be on guard. By the way, Chazal say this explicitly. Umi midbar matana. If a person makes himself ownerless like a midbar, God will gift you Torah as a gift. Umi matana b'mais. But once you got Torah as a gift, you're in danger of becoming arrogant, and then God will knock a person down. So a person always has to be on guard. That spiritual elevation is actually could be dangerous. The Gemara tells us a story about one of the Tanoim who just, here it is, It's on Masechta Tainis on Daf Chaf. Ma'aseh Sheba Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon mi Migdal Gadar mi Beis Rabbi v'yarachav al hachamar u'matayal al svas nar v'samach simcha gedola. He was coming from his Rebbe's house, and he was very happy. V'hoisadaitoi gasa alav, and he became arrogant. Mibnei shalom at Torah harbe, because he learned a lot of Torah. Don't think by doing mitzvahs, oh, I'm protected. Sometimes you have to be extra on guard once you've spent more time learning and davening and serving Hashem. So you have to be extra careful. In fact, the Shlach Kadosh writes, almost every sin of the Jewish people occurred after they just achieved the greatest madregos in Ruchnias. The most dangerous time to be prone to Yetzer Hara is when a person has spiritual elevation. The Chet HaEgel came right after Matan Torah. The Chet of the Misoinanim came right after the Degalim. Hashem gave us the Degalim. The Shlosh says every great sin of the Jewish people came in the immediate aftermath of great spiritual achievement. And therefore a person always has to be on guard. You're feeling good about your Ruchnias, that's the time to focus on humility. And therefore, especially when a person is not actually elevated in Ruchnias, he just is convincing himself I don't think my religious garb is religious enough. I want to look more from. Okay? There's something to be said for that. It will keep you away from the goyim. It will keep you modest. But on the other hand, since it's not intrinsic avodas Hashem, and it's going to make you think that perhaps you're on a certain level when it's only a costume, then it's dangerous. That was the shita of Slabotka, to de-emphasize chitzonios because of the danger of gaiva. Because we see there's a danger of gaiva even by authentic ruchnias, all the more so when it's not genuine. Obviously, it's a very sophisticated and fine line, because sometimes a person does have to do things and does have to take external measures to keep away from the nations of the world. But on the other hand, a person has to be extra on guard that it doesn't bring to gaiva. And finally, just a thought. There's a very interesting observation in the beginning of the Parsha. Why the Leviim had to shave all the hair off their body. By the way, some learn that's what Korach's problem with Moshe was. Moshe just had Korach shaved bald like an eagle. And it was pretty embarrassing to Korach. Korach didn't like that. Rashi says, why were the Leviim shaved? Because they were mechaper for the Bechorim. And the Bechorim sinned by the Egel. And they worshipped idols. And worship of idol is like mesim. And Mitzoirayim are like they're dead. That's how the Parsha begins. And a Mitzoira is shaved. And therefore the Levi also is treated like a Mitzoira. It's interesting then that the Parsha then begins and ends with the subject of the Mitzoira. Namely, it begins that the Leviim were shorn in like a Mitzoira, and it ends with the tsaras of Miriam. Now, I've never seen, and I would really like to delve into this further, does every Parsha have to have a specific theme? In other words, do all the subjects in one Parsha have to be connected? Does it have to open similar to the way it closed? Like in a bracha, we say it's choisei me'ena psicha. It ends off similar to the way it begins. But we do find in this week's Parsha that it ends off with the subject of tzaras, similar to the way it began, with the Leviim being shorn like mesim. Okay, so that is Parshas Behaaloscha, and now your favorite part of the week.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.